Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the elephant in the room. It's not something that's actually historically debated at all, but we're going to talk about it in a cultural context mainly, which is the bizarre claim that Queen Cleopatra was black. Effectively, Hollywood has whitewashed Queen Cleopatra to try to take away the noble heritage of, basically the Nubian people when you're thinking about that geographic location as ruler of Egypt. I would point out that Queen Cleopatra may not have been that physically attractive, so I'm not sure why you would try to be appropriating Queen Cleopatra historically. Most of the tales of her sensuality have to do with the fact that she was philosophical and literate, which was uncommon for females at the time, having, literal reign in the Egyptian Empire at the time, having a fairly vast, disproportionate amount of wealth at the time, leading up to various historical things that occurred, Julius Caesar and others anyway. Cleopatra was not actually black. She would have appeared effectively Greek. She would have had light skin, dark hair, and probably dark eyes, although they could have been blue, due to the fact that she was fundamentally of Macedonian transplant. That's what the Ptolemaic kingdom's rulers were. They were not native to the Egyptian area. And due to the tendency of royalty then to inbreed with at least cousins and sometimes outright siblings, and this was a thing before the Ptolemaics and lasted some time after as well, there's no reason to believe that Cleopatra would have looked anything other than white. And indeed that is what she is depicted as in literally all art from the period. There's only a small number of people that claim otherwise. And it's effectively part of the pseudoscience of offshoot black nationalism. It's basically proto-wokeness. The idea is, well, where this person was born in Africa, therefore we're claiming them as part of African American history. Which is really funny because it really often is just people from the United States and Canada. It's not really argued by people from Malawi or people from Nigeria or anything like that. And in Egypt itself, you have a fairly racist culture, actually. We'll be talking, by the way, about Egypt twice today. We've got to talk about it in terms of what's happening in the Sudanese coup that's currently ongoing. There is some fog of war there, my friend. It is definitely sheer. Cleopatra was effectively a Greek. She was a European. She comes from that same lineage and was white. Not like white with blonde hair, blue eyes. She wouldn't have looked like a Norwegian or a German or something. She would have looked broadly Southern European. She may have had slightly olive skin, but it's more likely from that particular area and time, she would have been relatively pale. Actually, there was also some Iranian blood in that same lineage, what is now Iran, and so that might have added a little bit of the ethnic look that people are so concerned about. But still, she would have been white in color. Now, again, the reason why this is even being debated at all is because of the ongoing tendency of a lot of Hollywood movies and Netflix and shit like that and Amazon to try to blackwash history. So, you can look forward to the time in which Abraham Lincoln, was half black or something. I'm surprised they haven't tried to claim that. George Washington clearly was part Asiatic. He was half Japanese. He was a Hapa or something like that. We're going to see stuff like that continue now. The reason they're doing that is not to convince anyone, because anyone with even a most limited historical appraisal of ancient Egypt in that time period would know otherwise. They're not trying to convince people of the veracity of the actual claim. What it is to stir up trouble and get attention. That's why I'm not even mentioning the specific series that's involved with stoking this so-called debate, because I don't want to give them attention. It's an interesting subject, but I'm more interested in the cultural side. The historical debate is ended long ago. The claim never had any veracity at all, has never been taken seriously, because you can literally study the lineage and you understand where it came from. You have artistic depictions of these people. By this time, art can be reasonably accurate. Now, sometimes it's stylized. Specifically trying to give dudes smaller penises. That is a concept that in antiquity, ancient Greece and Rome, was considered, you were a barbarian if you had a big schlong, like a slamaconda. And that's sort of where the modern trope actually comes today. That's been appropriated too with the BBC posters, actually. Trying to convince people that That history is actually a bad thing stylistically. The real aesthetic is, you want to not be able to walk straight with clothes on, I guess. It's very, very intriguing. Also ascientific, but, we'll get past that. This isn't the penis channel after all. Cleopatra, as a ruler, was an interesting person, personified, of course, within Shakespeare, among other things, and has fame living on to this day. One of the most famous people, actually, that lived, a consort, supposedly, of many, many people at the time, was basically a seductress, and killed herself in the end. We're not 100% sure about the asp story, whether that really holds water, though it's possible. And at the time was extra interesting. This is why the men flocked to her. It wasn't because of the power or anything. It was really because of the conversation. She was a pleaser. She knew how to speak to men and show interest. She understood military affairs, philosophy, and stuff. They tended not to get that with females, generally speaking, because they were illiterate. They weren't taught classical education in the liberal sense that we have now. They were taught music and sewing and cooking and things like that, although a lot of gourmands and shit were male back then as well. Tie in with philosophy, the De Re Coquinaria and so forth. Anyway, yes, Cleopatra was born in Africa. She was born in Africa the same sense that Elon Musk was born in Africa. I would note that the handful of people that are seriously claiming that Cleopatra was black because of the continent of her birth often claim the exact opposite about Elon Musk when you point out, hey, the richest man in the United States and second richest in the world now, the most successful African-American immigrant of all time, it's Elon Musk. And they'll say, no, it doesn't count. He's a Boer. He's from South Africa. He's an apartheid offshoot. Well, it doesn't really matter. Cleopatra and a bunch of Euro transplant Ptolemaics ran a country that largely is more ethnically dark than the Ptolemaic reign was. That lingers on into Egypt to this day. The idea that the Nubian transplant population from what is now Sudan or Ethiopia was ever representative of the average Egyptian ruler is wrong as well. If you look at the Egyptian struggles with the upper and lower kingdoms, etc., we're talking older antiquity and all the infighting. Again, there was Levant transplant, there was Southern European and Libyan influence, not so much within that ruling dynasty from the south. Now, they had more of a problem with like the fucking Hittites and shit over across the Sinai, influencing them than anybody else. Spent a great deal of time in the Sinai, by the way. One of the various empires that actually managed to hold the region for a short period of time, and the Greeks and then the Romans, well, Persians and then the Greeks and then the Romans and various other groups come in. I like it when people claim that the geography of origin has to do with race. Well, that's interesting because that means, you're cheapening the same nationalistic argument, the ethnonat argument, that like if two black people have a child in Germany and that child is raised up to learn German, they're from Germany, they don't know anything about, let's say, Ghana or wherever their parents are from, that they're not really German. But that's the same argument that is being made by some people about Cleopatra. Again, strangely enough, not about Elon Musk. I would think they would want to claim Elon Musk as an African American, which he is, literally for statistical purposes. I would think you would want to claim him. Look how successful he is, how famous he is. Somehow they don't want him, though. Could it be because he's not woke? It could be because of the fantastical tale of his emerald mine that he claims he never existed, and I don't think that there is evidence that he did. Yeah, I think that's probably why. So yeah, look at some of the mosaics contemporary to the period, or some of the other inscriptions describing Cleopatra, and then study a little bit about the Ptolemaic dynasties, and you'll realize that there is no chance that Cleopatra actually was sub-Saharan African. She was a Caucasian. That's about all. Peace out.